6 o'clock, let's get this show on the road. Call this meeting of the steering committee to order. Looks like we have everyone here with the exception of Mr. Gully, and he had sent me a text that he was running just a few minutes late, but that he did plan to be here. First item of business is to review the minutes from the March 10th meeting you have in front of you. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes? March 10th. Give y'all just a second to look them over. Yes, sir.
Move to approve the minutes.
We do have a motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Ford gets a second. Have a motion by Mr. Harsh and a second by Mr. Ford. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Got a few things that, well, one or two, I think one, that Mayor asked for us to review this property on Broadway. This is down next to the fire hall where the old tobacco warehouses were. And going over the surplus property. And Mayor, if I say something wrong, please correct me. The committee felt it would be best for the county to possibly hold on to that property in case we need it for future development. And also because of the previous uses that there might be some environmental issues with it at the rear of the property. So certainly needs to be, I guess, decided by the whole body whether or not we want to try to retain that property or not. Did I state that correctly, Mayor?
Yes, sir. The committee voted to send it to the county commission to determine whether or not you want to keep it for a public purpose. And I believe that was the advice of Mr. Beller, how he said it had to be done.
Okay. I think we've had several people inquire about the property, wanting to possibly purchase it. I think was the reason, and just when we were doing the tax sale of all the property that the county owns, it's not being utilized. That's why this piece of property, I think, came to be looked at. I think what was brought out in committee was the thinking that if we did need property for governmental use, I know we've talked about having to either enlarge the ambulance service or move it. There may be a day that we need to add on to the fire station, that it seemed prudent to maintain that property for governmental use going into the future. It's a relatively small lot, so it's not large enough for us to do a big development there, such as a school or anything of that nature, but certainly those type uses, it would be very suitable for that. My concern is, like I say, the environmental on the rear. I don't think there's anything back there, but there were things buried there that we don't know what they were. So I think it'd be best, at least for a while, for us to maintain control of that property, lest it gets, dug into and something very disturbing found. So that was my concern with us trying to sell it. But certainly up to y'all, whatever you want to do. Mr. Ford?
I'm gonna make a motion that we retain it for further use for the county, maybe later on. And I know there may be some people interested in it, but all they're gonna do is turn around and resell it. So I think it's one piece of property adjoining what we've got, we need to keep. So I'll make a motion, we keep it.
I'd second that.
Already had, I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor had second up, I think, or he was giving bunny ears to Mr. Gully. I'm not sure which it was. Okay. So we do have a motion by Mr. Ford and a second by Mr. Taylor. And this would be just to recommend to the full body that we retain the property. Is that, okay. You got that, Ms. Atwood? Mayor, would you like to speak to this before we vote on it?
Yes, sir. I always say one thing, the interest in the property has been from retail groups looking to build a store or something on it. That's been the interest on it. It hasn't been private individuals. It's been a retail group looking to build a location there. And one of them, if they opened a store, it typically has over $1 million in sales. So that's just what the interest was. And as far as how this came to our attention, I had what Mr. Byrd, when he was still a property assessor, pull all the county properties or anything, and this came up, and there's a bunch of properties the county had that it was statutorily required to put up and go through this process, and we hadn't done that. So in speaking with the county attorney, we need to go through that process.
And I will say that at any future time, we can come back, revisit this. We could, a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, we could come in there and vote to sell it as surplus property. Just because you're not doing it now doesn't necessarily mean that it's that way forever. I just want everybody to understand that. Mr. Gully, did you have a question?
I know I came in late and I do apologize for that, but this is the property directly beside our fire department, correct? Okay, I just make sure where we are. I'm certainly support that motion. Yes, sir. I certainly support that motion that was made there in this case to retain that property. Who knows where we might need down the road, but it's a good open tract of land at this point.
Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of recommending to the full body that we hold on to this property for public use, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say no. Okay, we'll take that up in our next Monday night meeting. Have it on the agenda. Mayor, did you have anything else for us tonight?
No, the only other thing I can think of are items coming up or already in other committees. So I can't think of anything that's business for this body.
Commissioners, y'all have anything that you want to bring up that we need to be looking at, working on, thinking about going into the future, or send over to committees for them to start looking at? Mr. Nolan?
I believe I mentioned for us taking a look at the impact fee, maybe to raise it a little to slow down our growth a little. Had several people talk to me about this, and the other thing was, I had a gentleman today, and that for retired people, like their house, not their whole property thing, but not to pay no property tax on their house.
Well, that'd be about 70% of your county. We have a program now, if they qualify for it, if they're low income, they can get a deferment on their taxes or a portion of their taxes. I'm not 100% sure of the program. I know I looked into it once I retired, but I made too much money. And so I wouldn't qualify for it. But if it is a low income family, they can get with the trustee. That does exist now for people that absolutely need it. We had our reassessment data. Probably everybody in here got a letter yesterday or today. I was lucky, I got 4 of them. And the thing that we must realize and try to explain to people is that just because your property values went up does not necessarily mean your property taxes are going to go up. It's a trifecta. It's 3 things. It is levy, what we need to run the government, the appraisal, and the rate. So if the appraisal goes up and you just still need the same amount of money, then the rate's going to go down to offset it. And we are mandated to do that. We have to take it down as much as we can to equal what it would have been. So what you're going to see is a dramatic rate in your dramatic drop in your property tax rate to offset these appraisals, which is really a good thing for the public, whether they realize it or not. they're getting a truer representation of the values of their property. So that when they go to sell it, they have a more accurate representation. And I've been saying for years, one of the reasons that our property tax rate is so high is that we're grossly undervaluing our property. And that's one reason those things offset. So I've had a lot of calls on it, and I think everybody has. I know Mike has, and I'm sure the mayor has. But I think, you know, the people, once I explained that to them, I think they seemed a little bit more, okay with the process of that's what it meant or what was going on with it. So I hopefully, if we can explain it to them in that way, it'll kind of have peace of pain. Also, they will have an opportunity at the Board of Equalization in June to come in and plead their case if they feel like their property is overvalued. So I think if we let them know of those things and assure of them of that it can kind of ease the shock of this a little bit. And I wish, had I known that they were going out, we maybe could have done something beforehand to make them aware of these things, but I didn't know when they were going out. And but so that's kind of where we're at there. One thing I do want us to think about before now and the end of the year, if we want to in any way change anything to do with the commissioner's pay, our committee, what we get paid or what we get paid for meetings, we have to do that at the end of a year to take effect with a new commission. So if there's something there that we feel like we need to lower, raise, whatever, we can be thinking about that. I'm pretty comfortable with where it's at. I think it's terribly unfair for, the only thing that I see that would be unfair about it is I feel like the officers of committees, such as particularly the secretary and possibly the chairman, deserve a little bit more pay than just the ones on the committee, because they do a lot more work. I also think, from personal experience, that the chairman of the commission, it's an insult to give them $50 a month for the work they do. I won't be your chairman, so that's why I'm saying that. If I were coming back, I would not be saying that. But y'all think about that. You know, follow me one day and you'll understand what I'm talking about. There's a tremendous, and I see Jerry nodding, see tremendous amount of time, phone calls, preparation, going to meetings, you know, and but just if we want to adjust it, that's when we need to adjust it. So just, and we got plenty of time to do that if we want to. I'm not saying we need to decide it tonight. That was not why I brought it up. It's just something that I think we need to be aware. I thought I felt like I would be remiss if I didn't remind us that this is the opportunity. This is the point in time that we do those things if we see a need to. And that's what I was trying to bring up at that point.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Nolan.
I think that most of our like committees or something, that when the mayor gets a raise, that we get a raise. But now, yeah, I mean,
I think right now it's whatever percentage the mayor gets statutorily, that would be applied to our stipend, or I guess it's actually per meeting, per diem. But that's just something I think that we need to, we may be fine with where it is. I'm just saying, if we want to do it, that's when we have to do it. Yeah. The other thing that's been brought up repeatedly, the wheel tax ends next month. It might not be a bad idea if we're going to do something with it to try to do it. The old commission going out before the new commission is seated. Sometime maybe July or August. If we feel like we're ready and know the amount that we want to do on that. That's really the only two things that are kicking around that I think are time sensitive, so to speak, as far as when you would maybe want to do those things.
Question, Chairman.
Yes,
In
sir.
reference to the wheel tax, historically, when we have had a wheel tax, there was a particular project such as our new high school that was earmarked for, and it was actually on referendum. In the event that the commission chose to look at that idea of possibly doing a wheel tax in the future, what committee would we send it to study what would be a possible specific purpose for the wheel tax? Does that make sense, what I'm asking there?
Well, I would suggest this one to begin with, possibly budget and finance for sure. Beyond that, if it was tied to a building, possibly building committee. If it is tied to the jail, I don't think law enforcement would be necessarily involved with it, but my understanding is that we can enact it or we can ask for it to go to a referendum. It's one or the other. It's not necessarily both. I know that I've taken the stand that I was very hesitant and reticent to do it without a specific purpose and for a specific amount that we knew would be an amount that we needed that would take care of whatever project it was linked to. I think we're getting into a position that we may be able to get some firmer figures, at least firmer estimations on what the jail would be or what we were going to try to approve with it. The RFQs have went out. They're due back in 15th, 17th. What is it?
No, they came in last Thursday.
Okay.
And professional services selection committee is meeting this Thursday.
So, that process is moving forward. It will, give us a lot of firm answers. I think some of these questions that we still have, hopefully, sometime, we've got 5 months before this train derails. April, May, June, July, August. So we've still, it's not like we're down to the wire on it at all. Mr. Clarity, I believe you were next. I'm sorry.
Bill was talking about maybe trying to figure out where it needs to go or whatever. Could we just do a temporary committee to do studies on what's needed for it or whatever? And then after that's decided, do away with it?
Good idea. Mr. Ford.
Me and the mayor was talking about this not long ago. I know 20 years ago when this was done, I was sitting on the court. And we wanted to do it as a body, but found out if we tried to do it that way, that a percentage of the last governor's race, they could go in and file a petition and throw it to referendum. Now, it was thrown to a referendum and it passed somewhat. In talking with the mayor, he seems to think that this body has the power to enact it. And if we do, that's good. But if we don't, you can forget your wheel tax, because you'll never get there. You see what happened to the 1/2 cent sales tax, got voted down 3-1. And it would be absolutely atrocious to the property owners in this county if we couldn't pass that wheels tax. It's hadn't paid all the bill on that high school, but it's went a long ways on it. A wheel tax like we had won't even pay the interest on what speculation says we're gonna build. To say a little bit about that, I know that they're looking for land, that's a thought, but I still think we ought to take a look at building this at the end of what we've got down there. We could save millions of dollars. Talked to Sheriff about it the other day, and he said, can't build it there, it's got a gas line across it. I said, move the dadgum thing. Then you could either use the building you got, tear it down, or buy the piece of property in front of it for parking or whatever. I fear the fact that if this thing does even get to 20 million, and the mayor in his conversations has alluded to 20 to 25. I know that's hypothetical, but it could be reality. This county cannot afford that kind of indebtedness. It will be atrocious to a lot of you people that's living on fixed income. They will not be able to pay it. Really will put a tremendous burden on some of the people in this county. And I think we need to look at it from all aspects.
Anyone else? Mr. Gully?
Just a question in this case here. So, as Mr. Ferguson said there a minute ago, it was done for a purpose. When people paid that $40 for their wheel tax, they could see that school. They could see where their money went. Can there be a purpose set aside and it go into capital outlay? In other words, we know there's going to be expenses down the road, schools, there's going to be expenses in those areas. I think I'd still struggle to see I'm with Mr. Ford, if I was putting whatever that dollar ends up coming out as, and I saw it going to a jail, and we're talking 50 to 100 people in our community that might be serving in that area. I don't think that's where we put the large amounts of our dollars of the people that are going to be happy with that piece. Myself, I've talked to a lot that I've had signatures from just to see where they were on these things in conversations. And I don't think people are going to be okay with thinking you spent that amount of money on a justice department or a jail to house possibly 100 people. I think it was 100 to 109 is what I think the projection there was 10 years down the road or somewhere in that range. However, that's a large amount of money for a very small population of individuals there that we're talking about, that we're discussing here. Whereas we could see benefit from that high school there. Benefit, they can see that there's something happening there with it. It's not going to be used for a jail is going to be used for one thing. Very simple. There's more opportunities. So I'd like us to think about that as well as we look at it. If capital outlay is an opportunity, maybe, we know there's going to be costs that come to this county in the future. Plain and simple. You've got 2 older schools as well. You've got a lot of older buildings in this county that are used daily. We see that there's not a lot of room at the admin building. I know it's new, but there's not a lot of room left there. There's going to be needs that are going to be addressed. To me, I think we ought to look at a capital outlay project down the road, account that's set for this. They can know it's going to this piece.
I think you would understand when we said putting it into capital outlay projects. I'm not sure the public would understand what that is, just to be honest. I think they're going to need something a little bit more definite and that they know. Now, as far as the jail, it's not a question whether we want to build one. We're at the wire that we're going to have to build one. And it's a matter of whether we decide what we're going to build, when, where, or the state comes in and says, we're building you a jail over here and you're paying for it. And and if you don't think that happens, I can show you cases of where it has happened. And so I don't want us to get into that position. And they're telling us that the only reason they're giving us a little grace right now is because we're seriously trying to make this happen and look at it. So we need to just keep that in the back of our mind that, yes, we have some decision making on how big, on where, all of those type things. But as far as whether we do it or not, I don't think there's any room to say that we can't. Yes, sir, Dan.
Don't hear me wrong. I realize that a jail is coming. I think the opportunity of what jail we choose to build in this county, how large we choose to go with that piece. There's a justice center that was just built. I like how much Ford put that here in this case just a few years ago. The commission before I came on, was part of that, a big part of that piece that passed that through and got it built. There's opportunities with that lot there beside it, as he said, what size we go with. We can want this, but what we need is maybe this. What I was getting at very simply was not that we just put a capital outlay account out there, but we think about some items that we know are going to be in the future. All right, we're going to go in and get this down, and this is what it's going towards in the future when this has to be built. We know this is coming. It's going. There's no doubt things are going to come up. What is that project or those couple of projects that we want to say this will be tied to exactly? In other words, not just an open account of capital outlay, something in the future. No, these are the things, or this is the thing in the future that this is going into, so that there's a knowledge of where that money is. I still think it's going to be very difficult if you try to pass a wheel tax and say that that's going to pay for a jail, and people drive by that jail and they see their dollar sign going into a jail. That school is something that's useful for the community. Don't hear me wrong. I realize the jail is a necessity for the community, but something that's not necessarily going to be a true benefit to our community.
Chairman, I'd like to add to that, because what he's saying, and just to even put it in layman's terms, there's nothing wrong with a person who thinks about buying a house that saves up money in advance for a down payment to buy that house. Now, that's very layman term oriented, but what he's saying, I totally agree with. We don't necessarily have to pinpoint the exact project, but if we had a list of these are the things that this is going to go towards, and we just haven't, pinpointed which one yet, but at the same time, probably excluding the one about the jail, because that's just not probably as palatable. But we at least have some things in mind. I think it doesn't hurt us at all to continue with probably the fairest tax that we have here in the county with some type of a project that we know. We're just saving up money for it because we know there's going to be a need for it.
And we certainly have been trying to do that. I mean, we've looked forward with this. We were able to garner a little bit more money from Core Civic that will help with this, whatever it is. So we're not really facing any other major building projects at this time. Yes, there will be in the future some. We'll probably have to add on to some schools. I know that right now we're going to have to look at a roof project out at the elementary school. So that we've kind of met on that. We're trying to argue with the insurance companies a little bit on it right now to see if they can belly up a little bit more money here. And but our buildings, the high school, if it does need to be added on to, was built where it could be added on to rather easily. The elementary school, there's room there at that campus. The middle school's a little locked in, but you do have some room for expansion there. So it's not like we're going to have to go out and buy property for a whole nother campus at this point, anytime in the near future. I'd say the next 10 to 20 years. None of us have a crystal ball, but that's, as far as major building projects, that's right now, the thing that's on our horizon is the jail in the Mr. Ford.
I don't know how many of you were there. I know some of you were there when we last met up at in Gatlinburg for that last, I think it's the last conference we had up there. And to verify what they said was, don't depend on state prisoner board to build jails, etc. right yet. Well, since then, COVID's hit, and if you've looked at your financial statement, you'll see that the funds that are coming in from those prisoners that we did have is considerably down from where it was. Of course, I talked to Ray about that. He said it was COVID, probably is. But The state has been very adamant about telling us, don't put your hopes in that building you a jail. Because they're gonna do everything they can to knock those prisoners down and cut that board money down. So we need to be careful and not plan on that helping us, because more than likely it ain't going to.
Where that can be of help is like it was with us here, when we added the extra space immediately in our immediate, we did not have to use it all for our prisoners or our people. We were able to take state people. And of course, that was at our discretion, whether we wanted them or not, but it can kind of balance out and make the amount of time that you're building for, it can expand it. If you just build it for what you need now, then you're going to be building it again in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. But by building it larger and being able to take state prisoners on the front end, as you need the space, you just don't keep the state prisoners. But you're exactly right. And they have warned us, and I know the mayor and I have been in meetings where they, said the same thing. Do not count on the state. Don't go out here and build a 300-bed prison or jail and expect us to send you 200 prisoners, to pay for your jail. It's not going to happen. And with the criminal justice reforms that are in the pipeline, that the state legislature that's coming down from the feds, that's exactly what Mr. Ford was alluding to, that we hope that all of those things are going to be able to reduce the jail population. I think if some of the things like decriminalizing some of your drug laws and things that have these automatic sentences will help. Being able to people to get their bond easier and things of that nature certainly will help as far as keeping them there. So that will hopefully curtail the curve of how fast you're going to need more space, but it's not taking away the fact that you're going to need more space, I don't think. Mr. Ford.
The last time that we renovated that jail, I can't tell you how many years it's been, but it's been probably 20, 25 years. We didn't raise taxes 1 penny. We took state board prisoners, completely renovated that jail when it was done. Now, going forward, as you just said, we've been told not to do that. But when we build this jail, jails are expensive. You talk about a high school down here, we've taken 20 years. It sunsets May the 31st, I believe it is. I've thought a lot about that. By the time we build this jail and hopefully get it paid for, then we're looking at the time you're talking about, and either even add on to the high school or the elementary or one of the other schools out here. So it couldn't have hit us probably at a better time than now, because we ain't got another major thing coming at us. But it's a question, it's not the question, do we need to build a jail? Question is, when and where and how much are we going to build? And we're not going to get by with that. I guarantee you 8.1 million, what we put in that school down there, that ain't going to build your jail. It's going to be more. A $40 wheel tax has paid a lot of it. It ain't paid it all, but it paid a huge amount of it. And everybody in the county got to participate in that. Now, if we don't want to mess around here and let that wheel tax go away. I know it's hard on some of our people, but everybody in the county's paid for that school. And if just the taxpayers alone has to pay for this jail, it's not going to be a pretty sight. And I just want to make you aware of those things now, because we're getting into the point, we're talking more about it. When we get these other things back, perhaps we can get a price on it. But I just don't, for the likes of me, I know I've asked 3 times, where are you going to get the money? I know we've talked about it 3 times. I've asked, where are you going to get the money? Well, right now, you ain't got one place to get it. And that's going back to your taxpayer. If we get a wheel tax in, that'll help. But I doubt seriously if we'll even pay the interest on it. I doubt seriously if it will. Mm, mm.
Obviously, $40 is not gonna do it. Mr. Ferguson?
So at this point, we've had some discussions about this, and so I kind of want to put out in front of everybody, do we feel like we're at the point now that we need to put our heads together and send it somewhere for further, a bigger look? Or do we just need to discuss this more? Because I do not want to be in a situation where we're just kicking the can down the road, because we know we're going to face it.
Well, like I said, when I started this whole thing, we should be getting into a position very shortly where we have some better answers to some of these unknown questions. So if we did anything tonight, it's premature. 2 months from now, hopefully we would be able to jump into it with both feet as kind of where my thinking
Yeah,
is.
that sounds
It's
good.
good
And
to start discussing.
If we have, yes, it's good that we're thinking about it, looking at it,
That's right.
talking to people about it, trying to feel them out, trying to understand. If you put, and I did try to do some numbers on it, if you put in today's dollars what $40 20 years ago was, you're looking at $80+ in today's dollars. So to raise the same buying power that $40 did 20 years ago, you're looking at $80. So just to equal what that wheel tax was, you in spending power, you have to at least be looking at $80 or more on wheel tax. And I know people will just go bonkers over that, but it's just it's just a fact. I mean, we have to factor in inflation on these things. And I'm just saying that to say, I know it sounds like a lot of money, because it is a lot of money. I've got 5 vehicles I'd have to buy it on, and I know not everybody does, but I think that we have to realize it, I mean, we just have to face the music that money's not has the same buying power today as it once did. And we're going to run into that too. Whatever $80 generates for the next 5 years, that sliding scale, you're going backwards every year if it's at the same dollar amount. And far as to what it's going to be able to generate in actual dollars, in actual spendable dollars. So it's going to be a lot of head scratching. It's going to be a lot of explaining to a lot of people. I understand that. I get that. I don't see how that we have, really much of any choice. And I'm saying that to say, if I could afford to pay $40 20 years ago, I can afford to pay $80 now. And you can argue with me that you can't, but I will argue with you that you should be able to. Okay. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. It's just simple arithmetic. Mayor, did you want to say something?
Just on if you are going to do it as the county commission, you need to keep in mind that would be a taxing ordinance, so it'll have to pass 3 separate readings, the same as the budget. But you can do the second and third reading the same night, same like you do with the budget. Because I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
And I would also add for Commissioner Gully, we do actually have a capital improvement fund currently. There's no revenue set to go into it, but it's sitting there with about $21,000 in it. And looking back, I had a question came to me recently on our impact fee. We were able to do that because a private act was passed in the state legislature. It said that had to go to capital projects and debt. When they were using it to pay on the high school up until around 2018 or so, then they moved it over to the general fund, which is allowable on there. I personally have a problem with that, because then you're commingling funds with everything else. And how can you say that impact fee really went to these capital improvements if it's in there with everything else? So I would just say that is another source you could look at. Now it is going to put some pressure to raise your property taxes, and you'll have to weigh that in if you move that money over to the capital improvement fund. However, traditionally, that is what impact fees are done. They're either used to go into a debt service fund or they go into a capital improvement fund. So that's another revenue source you could look at there that you'll have to take into consideration, how that all weighs out with your property taxes and everything else.
There are two different, I mean, we have adequate facilities tax and we have impact fees. I believe what we truly have is an adequate facilities tax that we always refer to as an impact fee. They are two separate animals under state law, and we need to make sure that when terminology is important, and what we have is an adequate facilities tax, which is a bit different from an impact fee. I can't get into the legalities of it right now, but they are two separate animals.
With that said, though, what does that impact fee generate a year? Can we get that number in the near future?
Yeah, and I think we normally budget it somewhere around between 130,000. I don't know what the actual is. I have to go back and look at our last audit now to give you the drop dead actual figure on that, but I think it's around, somewhere around in there, 130 is what we normally budget on.
In years past, it was as low as 40 to 60,000, but as of late, I think the last 4 or 5 years, it's not dropped under 100. And it is split between the two different, I guess, is it between 111, 151, or?
No, I believe I'll have to check on that. I want to say it all goes into the 101, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to check into it. I do know the building, there's different building permits. It goes to 101 and 111. But I think all that, well, as you said, it's actually an adequate facilities tax. I think that goes all into the 101, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I have to check into it.
But I don't want anyone to think, anyone listening at home or anyone that may look at this later, to think that we're talking about doing this just to put in the black hole called budget. You know, we're needing this funds if we do this for a specific purpose, a specific need, that we can't generate enough income out of just the property tax without it being unfair to the property owners. So that's why we're trying to broaden the base of income to try to do this. But I think it's something that we're going to need to try to address if we can before we swap county commissions. Not necessarily, but it may be something that we want to do, and let some of the ones that are not coming back take the heat for it. And I'll be glad to do that. Mr. Harsh.
I think that's what I've been hearing Mr. Ford say over a period of time, that we're going to have a jail. The state's going to make us do it. It's not going to be popular. And based upon the sales tax failing at referendum, this wheel tax for a jail would fail. And if it does, if we do help the property tax payers in this county with a new jail, it'll be that the county commission most likely would be the one to pass the wheel tax if it gets passed. And that's just the bottom line to it. You can meet and discuss it from now on, but that's the facts of it.
Well, I think we're elected to look at the hard things and make the hard decisions. And I don't shy away from that. I've never been one that shies away from that. Sometimes it's hard to balance what the constituents want and what the constituents need, or what you're forced to do. As you have all learned in the last few years, about 90% of what we do in here is mandated by the state of Tennessee. We really can affect only about 10% of what the county does. And this is one of those things that we're going to be mandated to do it. It's just a matter of exactly when and how I think really the only decisions we have on it. And we do have choices, and I'm glad we do have choices, even if they are hard choices and will be hard to explain and hard for people to possibly understand. But I think when you look them in the eye and you tell them we had to do it, we had to do it. You know, it affects me too. I think people, I guess I feel better. I feel like the public maybe will understand. And I guess that's kind of where we're at this point in time. But I think we can just, we know we've got to face this, and I am not going to shy away from it. It'd be easy for me to try to ignore it and kick the can to the next commission and not be here and let somebody else take heat for it. But if it's something that we need to do and we can get it done, let's get it done. I mean, that it's just, you know, that's my thinking. So did we have anything else that anybody wanted to bring up or talk about, or?
Yes, I do, Chairman. I'd
Yes.
like to get an update if possible. Recently, we had the grant for the park, and we as a commission had decided to move and do some actions towards that endeavor. And I'd like to see if anybody can give us an update as to where that is. And, you know, I know we had some discussion about the ground surface covering and whatnot. So just if somebody can give me where we are with this, I'd like to know.
Mayor?
All right, well, there's actually 3 separate items for the park. The first one you talked about was the grant. That'd be the local Parks and Recreation Fund grant. The TDEC just completed their environmental review. And there's a letter I've got to turn in to them saying, we understand we'll follow state, federal laws regarding permitting and all that stuff. And we're actually having a meeting with them, I believe tomorrow, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The second one, if you're talking about the rubber mulch, given some of the issues that the last woman come out and looked at it for the safety inspection, one of the questions I want to ask tomorrow when we have our meeting with TDEC, since they're the ones going to do the final inspection on the entire park, is to get some of their thoughts on going forward on it. I have pulled some RFPs from other communities that have done surfacing. Now they all nowadays, the ones you find online are for the poured in place. We're not doing that, but I think we can just take that language out and put in the rubber mulch and get those specifications there. So I don't, as long as we get an okay or some kind of faults from TDEC, we can move forward with that. The last one was the repairs on the play equipment, and the county commission approved funding for that last month. I've already signed the purchase order on that, and I think we've already got our order in. So we are moving forward with that. TDEC took, I'm thinking, 6-7 months to do the environmental review. So that kind of held back some progress there.
I really don't understand why TDEC did an environmental review on the park. Is it because of the grant? Was that the reason they were involved in it? Because it was a TDEC grant?
Yes, it's part of the requirement as they're doing these grants. It has to do an environmental review and look at the impacts. Like if there had been some kind of environmental issue, we would have had to resolve it, but there was nothing they found on ours. They do it within, I think, a quarter of a mile of your site, and say they look through databases and all the stuff to see what could have been environmental issues around that site. And then they submit to you a review saying these are actions you got to take to remediate these environmental issues, but they didn't find anything for ours. So I don't think there's anything we have to do, but it's just a required step of the process.
That answer your question?
Yeah, that's the update I was looking for, because it had been a while since we had moved that forward, and just kind of want to know where we were in that process. So, yep.
Mr. Clary, do you recognize?
Yeah, I just wonder, has there been a PO issued for the rubber mulch yet, or?
No, since it's going to be over $10,000, we're going to have to do a request for proposal. I've already talked to a couple of them, and as soon as we get the specs going out to them, they'll do a request for proposal and they'll submit it. So we'll have different companies submitting their proposals on the cost of doing the rubber mulch.
I do have one more question to that effect. What does our timetable look like on that now that we're at that stage now where TDEC has done their part and we're doing bids? What does it look like? 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, based on the feedback I get from them tomorrow, I would hope we'd be able to at least have it out within the next 30 days. But like I said, I'm going to get feedback from TDEC tomorrow, because at the end of the process, they're the ones that's going to inspect the entire park, and it has to pass their inspection.
If it were to fail inspection, that's for that grant that we roughly was $98,000 grant, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes.
That was for the playground equipment for ADA compliant area, safe area there into the park. 98,000 is what we're talking about there, correct?
Yes, it was a 50-50 grant, so we're funding the rest of it.
Understood, but if the TDEC failed, we didn't meet compliance, we're looking at $98,000 extra dollars. Is that correct?
That's my belief, and that's something I'm gonna ask them tomorrow, but it's my understanding that if we did not pass inspection, there could be some penalty and that could be repaying the grant. So again, that's another question I'm gonna ask them tomorrow in our meeting.
Going back to this rubber mulch, I thought we already had 3 companies to give us a quote on what they would cost. Why would we need any more?
Well, here in the last few months, we've seen costs go up, and those were just an initial for budgeting. Now that we've actually passed something and got it funded, we're going to do a request for proposals, make sure we have the most up-to-date quotes we can get.
But we've already allocated $100,000 on it.
Yes, and when we do a request for proposal, we're going to have a site visit so they can all come out and look at it and then give us feedback. That one lady that was here from Miracle, she talked about maybe having to put down some other mats or anything. If they look at it and say, we're going to need this, this, and this, and then their proposal includes items that weren't in there, that could raise the price. But so I want to get a proposal to see exactly what their cost is going to be.
Yeah, but she was wanting to put wood chips. She didn't have anything to do with the rubber mulch.
Actually, her company is going to build on it if it's rubber mulch. They do playground equipment and everything in general.
Yeah, but she was trying to talk us out of the rubber mulch. She said it wasn't any good. She wanted to go with wood chips. So why we would want to bring somebody back when we've already discussed and allocated the money for the rubber chips?
Well, if you put out a request for proposal, there will be other groups other than hers. If she wants to come back and look at it and bid, she can, but there'll be probably 2 or 3 other ones that'll also put in a proposal.
Anyone else?
The Park and Rec Committee has been discussing this, I think at length. Mr. Gregory's here. Can y'all, is there anything else we need to know about this? I mean, when you all have talked about this in committee, anything that we're missing right now?
No, we had looked at it. My remembrance is that the committee looked at it and made the decision that because the wood chips in the past have only lasted about 2 years and they were having to be replaced, that it would be advisable to look at an alternative. That's where the rubber chips came in, because we're using them in the play areas at the schools with some success. And the committee voted that to recommend going with the rubber chips, and the commission approved it and appropriated the funds to be able to do that. And I think myself and obviously some of y'all felt like that it would be ordered, or if an RFQ or RFP or RFG needed to be done, that it would be done then right away. I don't think it was explained to us that it was dependent upon TDEC making a decision of what kind of surface we put on our playground, as long as they're both approved surfaces for the playground. I think we that wanted to go with the rubber have put a lot of wood chips and a lot of money and raised money to put wood chips in, and saw them just not last very long at all. I do know that there are some issues with the heights of the playground equipment and things that she brought out that are going to have to be addressed. And my understanding, the putting of a rubber mat under them is just a rubber mat. I mean, before you put the rubber down, you put the mat down and then you put it down. If you need to put some dirt to raise it up before you put the mat down. Yeah, there's going to be some site work that has to be done at some of the equipment without a doubt to get the level back up to what it was when we first put it in. But that's, you know, I think, you know, I hate to use the vernacular. What we have here is a failure to communicate, but I think we all thought that we had done all that we needed to do to make this happen. And then we're still sitting here wondering, why hasn't this happened? And I guess that's the maybe I'm just being blunt, Mayor, but that's what I see. That's what I hear, from the group here. But, if we couldn't do it, I wish you could have told us, guys, you can't do this. And, or let us know that we have to do this before we can do this. And you may have said it. I'm not saying you didn't. You may have, but if you did, it wasn't understood. And so I guess that's where we're at with the project. I mean, I think he's explained where we're at and why we're where we're at, and hopefully we can move it forward.
Well, it's one of the most widely used items that we have in the county. A lot of people like it. And of course, summertime's coming. Of course, it's April now. So that was one of the reasons why I was wondering where we are with it, because that's when you get the most use out of it.
Mayor, did you have any more you wanted to say about it? Are we missing something that you need to let us be aware of? Please do.
Well, the RFP is going to be for the rubber chips. Just get a better price on it and get quotes on it and see what it's going to take. And like I say, if they come out and say, well, you're going to have to do this, this, and this, and that adds to the cost, then we'll have a better idea at that time. As far as the difference in the chips, I did at one point say that because there was initially we got quoted a certain type of rubber chip or rubber mulch. And then we found out later that TDEC had uses a different standard. So then that changed and that increased the cost, if I remember correctly. But again, like I said, we've gotten to this point. We're hoping to do it within the next 30 days. I think we'll know a lot more after I talk to TDEC tomorrow. Might be able to do it sooner.
Mr. Ford, you're recognized.
My remembrance in that, when we discussed that, was just gonna put those in defined areas where they were the most needed, like the swings and some of the slides and things. But I understood that we had prices on them, and now you go getting prices again, most likely they're gonna go up, gonna wind up costing us more money. So I don't know. I totally don't understand what's happened here.
Anyone else? Well, that would be good. One last thing, if we're through with this one, got your on your agenda there at the bottom, the committees that we have so far meeting this month. If you have one that you need to work in between some of these, please get with Amy. We've already sent these out, but certainly we can add it in if we need to. But I just wanted you to have those. I appreciate her putting those on there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I believe the April 14th date, I think the water board is going to try to schedule a special meeting. I think they're shooting for 5 o'clock that night. So I just make everyone aware that there might be, April 14th may not be available depending on if the availability of the board members. I think right now they're seeing if they're available for either 5 or 6 o'clock.
Right. We were looking at 5 or 6. I think it's tending toward going ahead with 5 is my understanding with talking with Heather yesterday. So 14th, probably 7 would be the earliest that you would, if you needed to use that night. Mr. Ford?
For the last prisons relation meeting we had, you know, the warden didn't show up, and we're down to that time again. So I don't know if we're gonna have it or not, but it's down to the time we should be doing it if we're going.
I had asked her to go ahead and schedule it and put it on the on here, and I don't see it. Simply felt like we needed to have it because he wasn't able to. He had a death in the family. He was out of town. That's understandable. But since we certainly didn't get that then, I thought we needed to go ahead and have it in April. We'll look at that again. I'm sorry, I thought it was on here. I know we talked about a date, putting it on here, and may have been she was waiting to hear from you on it. I'm not sure. But I thought we were going to add that, and then certainly we will. I know what it was. She was going to check with his secretary and see what date would be suitable if he had conflicts with anything. I remember now before we did that. That's why we hadn't put it on here yet. Mr. Nolan?
Before we adjourn, how's the water board building going?
Well, it's,
How far is it?
they're framing up the interior walls and things at this point. There was a little bit of a delay, my understanding, on the drive-up window about getting it, but it's progressing. They've scooped out, for the additional driveway width and all this sort of thing. So it's, Mayor, I think it's progressing very well. The main framework of the building's up, and they're starting working on the interior parts of it.
I make a motion.
Anything to add, Mayor?
No, that's correct. That's exactly where it is.
I really do think that additional 20 feet is going to make a huge difference on the turning radius out there at the driving window. That was one of my main concerns about putting it there, was that. And since we do have that, I feel a lot better about the building being there. I think that'll make a tremendous amount of difference in the usability of it. What are we gonna do? Mr. Walsh is not here.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Public comment? I see one public.
Several things. I think everybody that discussed the jail and the wheel tax tonight brought up very good points. And all of that is terrific consideration going forward. I bark about this all the time, but Mr. Jewell is exactly right. $40 is not the $40 it used to be. And when you're putting something in place that is potentially going to be 20 or 30 years down the line, you might consider a sliding scale tied to the rate of inflation so that that $80 doesn't become $40 in 20 years. Aside from that, the Hartsville Backpack Charity Car Show is coming up on July 30th. It is being held 1 week prior to the main county fair. And this is pretty exciting for me because that gives us the use of the entire school and the entire parking lot, because on that first weekend, the fair doesn't begin until the evening and so there's no overlap with parking and activities. And the car show has grown exponentially over the past several years. We had 261 cars last year in the rain. So I think if we have good weather this year, we're going to be between 300 and 350. So I had an idea, and that's always a dangerous thing to say out loud in public, but I had an idea. We're having an election year and we have so many officials that are rerunning and new candidates. I would like to extend an invitation to all candidates running in this county to come to the car show. I'm going to designate an area where you can set up a table and a pop-up tent, and you can hang your sign up and you can meet your constituents and talk with the public. One of the main considerations, or one of the main complaints I hear from the general public, is they don't really have an opportunity to interact with the candidates. They don't really know who you are or what you're about. This would be a perfect opportunity for you to capture some attention and talk to some people and shake some hands at a large event where we're going to have potentially 1,000 people or more there at any one time. So I have flyers with me. I would like to hand them out tonight to everyone. I would like to encourage you to contact me, whether it be text or email or call me and confirm so I can set aside a space for you. And we're going to do a U-shaped compound just to the left side of the edge of the school, the high school, in that grassy area. That way everybody has equal frontage and equal exposure. And you can put up a little pop-up tent, a 10 by 12 tent or whatever. And that way you can put your table out there, stay out of the sun, because it'll be hot as all get out that day, I can promise you. But you can get out of the sun, put your sign up, and then you can meet people. And we need to advertise this and put it through Facebook and put it publicly and try to encourage our community to come out and meet you guys and the other folks that are not here tonight that are running. We have several mayoral candidates. We have lots of commissioners. So we're trying to turn this into a community event, not just a car show. I'm doing this with an underlying agenda also, because the more people out there that we get, the more successful our show will be, and potentially the more successful our charity fundraising will be. So it serves a lot of purposes, and it might be a good platform for everyone. And if anybody has ideas or suggestions to make that a better situation for everybody involved, I'm all ears. Mayor?
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you could kind of go over if there's a booth rental, what it is, just generally in different spaces, sizes or anything like that, because that way it's on video right here and people can go back and watch it if we just get some specifics on that.
Excellent. And I'm gonna put these flyers out to everybody tonight. I'm also gonna bring some up to the administration building. I'm gonna try to post this, and I would encourage you to post it on your personal Facebook pages or your district pages or whatever you do typically to communicate with your constituents. But try to draw your constituents out and let's get a big showing so you get to meet your people. There's no booth rental. This is a free event for you guys. All we want is participation. Now, I absolutely will not turn down donations to the charity that day, but I don't care if it's $5. If you want to hand me some money, I'm all in. It's all going to feeding kids, and that's a good thing. And it's a good thing, you know, I think for our elected officials to participate in these community events, especially when they have such a genuine, you know, focus on trying to help the children. But a little pop-up tent, you know, I don't know how big they're, like 6 feet or something. Just whatever you need. Now, I don't want somebody coming out there with a 30-foot stage, but if everybody has kind of an equal table and a little pop-up tent, that would be great. I see somebody laughing over there. But everybody should be equal. We don't want anybody to have, you know, you can bring 1 or 2 signs to put in your tent. We don't want to plaster the yard with your signs. We want everybody to be represented, but we want everybody to be equal. We are not a partisan situation. This is just a community situation offering you a free platform for you to meet with a lot of people just before the election. If anybody has any criticisms about that or suggestions or ideas, I'm absolutely
Great
open.
idea. Appreciate you.
We've never
doing
done
it.
this
We've got the
before.
space to do it now, so it's a no-brainer at that time of year, right before the election. It makes a lot of sense, and appreciate you doing that, bringing that to our attention. I will remind everybody that's planning on doing that you are on school property, so you shouldn't be handing out your half pints of whiskey down there at this event. That probably would not be a good idea. But I just thought y'all probably knew that. I didn't need to put that in there, but I did. Mr. Taylor, did you have something?
One last thing, please. If you're going to come, I know everybody wants to go home. If you're going to come, please contact me so I can confirm and plan adequate space for everybody who would like to attend.
And you can register online with your vehicle this year? Going to register online this year again with your vehicle?
Yes, we have our Facebook page. We have our online registration. We have new artwork for t-shirts this year. So we're going to have fresh t-shirts for people to get, and as well as last year's t-shirts at a discount. So we have lots
and
of
who was the first person to register online last year?
I don't know. He was some guy out in the woods. I don't know his name.
Goofy old guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised he had the internet out there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We got flyers. I like daisies. You like roses, but we got flyers. Mr. Taylor, did you want to make a motion? Yeah. What was that motion? Oh, thank you, sir. We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Mr. Gregory gets a second. All in favor, say aye. Thank you for your time and attention. A lot to be thinking about and a lot to be pondering.